Hi, my name's Jane Hoffman. My name is Jane Hoffman, and I went to Cal State University obtaining my master's in political science. I've observed American politics since the late 1960s. When I was about 8 years old in 1968, I would like to explain pragmatically to the American people who still have common sense why Donald Trump should not run again for the highest public office in the land. He was twice impeached by the House. His credibility and overall sense of responsibility and dignity is washed away not only by the January 6th proclamations, but the fact that he's only using the strength of his personality to try to take command again of the top job in the nation. The reason that he thinks that he is entitled to the second takeover of the White House at the end of this year in 2024 is because he thought he rightfully won the election in 2020. Secondly, he thinks his followers who support him have enough political arsenal to beat any of his challengers. One problem that he faces, which is major, is that he hasn't wiped clean or made amends for the problems he's made in the past. He hasn't apologized for the impeachment. He hasn't apologized for his adultery with Stormy Daniels. And he keeps plowing forward with negative behavioral actions that imply that he's really not truly repentful. So I'm probably going to discuss the biblical implications first. I've been a Christian since I was 4 years old. I had Psalms 23 memorized by age 5. I have 5 to 6 chapters of the Bible fully memorized. I will just give you one clip now just to prove that I'm right. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were made through him, and without him not anything was made that was made. In him was the light, and the light has overcome to the darkness. The darkness has not overtaken it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He was not the light. The true light that enlightens the world was coming into the world, but many believe not. So I'm just going to stop there because it's just an example. If a Christian is truly repentful, he has to reflect back on his older actions and come forth. Since Donald Trump is in the public eye already, and his job pertains to being in the public eye, he must fully repent of all his sins and all his shortcomings. That includes not continuing to bash his enemies and ridicule them, such as Nikki Haley or Vivek Ramaswamy or anybody else that's standing in his path. He is not to depict pictures of Joe Biden dead in the back of a truck, which he did recently. And he has to take ownership of the things that he's facing in court because there are real consequences. He can't talk out a turn in court. He must wait for his turn. And he must try to reasonably argue about why he thinks the 91 felony charges involved in the courts are either wrong or right. I feel like he tries to be persuasive at his Trump rallies, but it's more of a we them mentality. And like they're coming after us type of thing, and we're going to remain strong. But he doesn't realize that 52 to 60% of the majority, or even more, maybe even 70%, do not want another Trump presidency. It might be someone who just doesn't like his personality or they're indifferent to his policies. It doesn't have to be necessarily a Democrat. It could be an independent. The next thing I want to say about Donald Trump is that he was impeached twice, as I mentioned. And the next thing is that Richard Milhous Nixon helped orchestrate the break-in of the Watergate building so he could spy on the Democratic National Headquarters. He was 20% ahead in the polls when he did this, and there was no reason for Richard Milhous Nixon to do that. It was basically all boiled down to paranoia. God knows why he taped himself in all those conversations. But when the rubber met the road and he was busted by two reporters, he resigned from office and never looked back. He didn't try to come back for a second hurrah in Washington or upset the status quo. He just stayed at home in Southern California and wrote books, and I'm sure at times he was a consultant to somebody. Donald Trump is personality driven and a narcissist. So he really doesn't care about his negative effect on the American public or the collateral damage that happened when he continued to deny certain behaviors and not come clean. This put Donald Trump in an awkward position, and also other people around him, like Michael Pence. Nobody is expected to be that loyal to somebody who's defied logic for a long length of time. It's not about being liked, or you have to think about the legacy of your character and position. For example, I recently watched a documentary on Bobby Kennedy Jr. From the time he became senator in the mid 60s in New York, I believe it was 65, to the time that he died on the floor of the hotel in Los Angeles, he was going to all different parts of the country. He was visiting with Cesar Chavez and the farm workers' strike. He was in Appalachia and Mississippi looking after the poor in the Mississippi Delta. At that time, at a great time of idealism, he was trying to alleviate poverty for poor people, and he was trying to find methods, like he did with a private corporate grant in New York, to try to help people find jobs and find purpose in life. He rebuilt a lot of tenements in one of the boroughs in New York, and some of it was used from private funding that he received from banks, and he coordinated with a lot of community leaders. Donald Trump isn't projecting that. He's projecting, woe is me, I'm being slammed with all these legal charges, I want them to go away, it's all bogus. And he's not really personifying to the American people his true desire to be in office, except for to say, I want to keep America great and go back to some of my former policies, such as probably bringing manufacturing jobs into the country. But it seems like his policy-driven ideas are often drawn from stating in advance who the enemies are and who he's against, such as perhaps the success of the Chinese or the labor market of the Mexicans. There always has to be some risk factor with him and some negativity. I'm doing part 2. I just got off the overnight shift, and I'm doing part 2 in a little while later today. And thank you for joining me. I'm just throwing out some ideas that will restore logic to the American people so they can decide on their own what are the risks of trying to vote Donald Trump back in office with all his dark legacies of impeachments, federal trials, and flawed behavior of never looking back and trying to reform his old behavior. Thank you.